Fascinating aspect of history is that almost every object you can imagine holds a story, a glimpse into the past. Perhaps it is furniture, maybe silverware, or maybe even light fixtures. In the case of Linden Place, wallpaper has revealed itself to be another avenue of understanding the mansion, its inhabitants, and the time period in which they existed. Wallpaper is not entirely common in private homes now, but in the 19th century it grew into a thriving industry that represented personal taste and social class, while also reflecting the interconnectedness of America and the world. Known as paper hangings, wallpaper was available in America by 1700, but was not manufactured in the country until the 1760s. Book printers provided the original designs for paper hangings, but were eventually replaced by textile designers and paper stainers in the 18th century. Paper designs were typically made using the block printing technique, wherein wooden blocks would be carved with the design the paper hangings would have. Ink was then applied onto these blocks and pressed onto the paper to transfer the design. Early English designs primarily used black ink, but these colors diversified over time. Most 18th century paper hangings were sold in rolls with a standard length of around 12 yards, or 36 feet. A horizontal seam placed at recurring intervals likely indicates that a wallpaper was handmade, with seamless paper only appearing in the 1850s. At its inception, wallpaper was originally considered to be the purview of the wealthy, but over time, as it became easier to produce through the implementation of technology, its use became more widespread in homes of all social standings. The three main parts of the wall that were wallpapered were the frieze, the fill, and the dado, which are pictured in the diagram above. By the late 19th century, the colors of these three areas complemented each other, but early 19th century homes such as Linden Place would have been composed of an eclectic amount of styles with as many patterns together as possible. Additionally, ceilings would sometimes be wallpapered with simple designs. Examples of the eclectic use of patterns in the 19th century are pictured above in a mansion in Hudson, New York, and the Dumbarton House in Washington, D.C. This presentation and research comes from a recent rediscovery within the Linden Place archives. Hidden away in a closet on the third floor was a large box holding folders of wallpaper snippets, some with small pieces of paper describing what was enclosed. Many of these wallpapers do not have a label or maker attributed to them, but the ones that do provide information about the collection. Several hangings are labeled with the name Janeway and Carpenter, an American manufacturing company that operated in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Janeway and Carpenter was one of the largest wallpaper manufacturers from the 1880s to the 1930s, and the fact that its paper exists in our archives suggests that other items may be from a similar time period. So, although our wallpaper may not exactly be from the early to mid-19th century, they embody styles that would have been popular when the DeWolf family originally established their home. Now, let us examine some of these designs. Frieze papers acted as borders on the wall, surrounding other patterns that would have taken up the majority of the wall space. These borders did not necessarily have to match the papers that surrounded it. However, in the later years of the century, complementary solid colors were used in between the borders, which would have brought general harmony to the rooms in which they were used. French patterns were particularly popular among Americans due to their complexity and bright colors, which carried an air of sophistication. In fact, Americans were so fond of their paper hangings that even when they became able to produce their own paper in the 1860s, they still enjoyed French designs, exempting French wallpaper from tariffs. As such, French designs abounded in early to mid-19th century homes, with the most popular patterns by far being floral and vine imagery, which are pictured in the fragments above. French scenic wallpaper was perhaps the epitome of luxury and class. These beautiful pieces were made with hand-carved blocks and were filled with detail. These panoramic views were the pride of the French, and entrenched the rooms in which they were placed in foreign scenes, bringing the views of the world to the comfort of the home. Zuber, which still operates to this day, was the largest of these scenic wallpaper manufacturers, best known for their idyllic and romantic scenes. Zubair catered to popular tastes in literature and art while also conforming to present stylistic taste. A well-preserved scenic piece by Zubair, known as Les Lantaines and Les Bocage, is on display in the Linden Place gift shop and is pictured on the slide. Zubair's work is also featured in the White House and is a staple in many a historic home. Dufour was another large French manufacturer of scenic prints, although theirs often featured historical scenes and mythological subjects. One of Dufour's prints, The Savages of the South Pacific, which features images from Captain Cook's voyages, was likely on display in the parlors of Linden Place. This paper was also featured in the Mount, the Bristol home of James de Wolfe. It is speculated that when George de Wolfe went bankrupt in 1865 and all the items from Linden Place went to auction, this paper hanging was for sale and then moved into the Mount by James. This may explain why the scenic paper was installed in James's bedroom, an unlikely location for the style. Scenic prints were often displayed in hallways and above chairs and railing. These designs were popular until the 1850s, when they began to be considered gaudy. The French were also known for their imitations of architectural elements to frame scenes. These architectural fakeries included columns, draperies, and balustrades, and they often framed wallpaper to add depth to a design. However, these designs fell heavily out of favor in the 1870s and 80s when the aesthetic movement began in England. This movement decried the use of imitation and championed the use of flat abstract designs. Flocking was another unique way of producing wallpaper. It gave designs a finish that was soft to the touch. Flock was usually made of wool or silk. It was placed on a varnished, printed, or stenciled pattern. By the 1880s, colors were added to the flock through dye, which also helped to keep the fabric in place. A specialized method for producing flocked paper was also used in the late 19th century, which involved the beating of calf skin over a length of paper to raise a cloud of flock. These papers can also be described as embossed. Landscape figures, or vignettes, were French designs that consisted of a simple repeating pattern with a scene of humans or animal figures surrounded by flowers and foliage. There was an immense variety of forms that these papers could take, and they made for a charming accent. However, not all designs were elaborate. It was common for homes to have much smaller, simpler, repeating designs. These pieces may have been hung in private rooms, such as bedrooms, or may have even decorated ceilings, while larger and more complex designs were relegated towards the public areas in a home. Blue was a particularly popular shade in American society, and a design such as that on the left would have been both simple and sophisticated. The design on the right is that of a spider web and was likely used to paper a ceiling. By the mid-19th century, the development of printing machines changed the very being of the wallpaper industry. Because these designs were no longer block printed, their patterns had to be short enough to fit cylinders that were usually 6 inches or 15 centimeters in diameter. Not only were coloring materials thinned down, but colors also became brighter through the use of cheaper synthetic pigments, creating hues such as chrome yellow and ultramarine. This technological period also spawned a new era of wallpaper consumption. Machines made wallpaper more readily available to a new population of urban immigrants, children of farmers moving to the city. In order to rise above their birth stations, this newly emerging middle class eagerly consumed intricate patterns, designs which took inspiration from earlier architectural and decorative forms. The Neoclassical Movement began as early as the 1760s in the Western world, drawing heavy inspiration upon motifs common in classical architecture, literature, decorative arts, and theater. By the 1860s, a Renaissance revival once again made neoclassical designs popular, infusing them with Renaissance elegance and class. Neoclassical themes also appeared in wallpaper, and were popular with Americans who associated them with Greek virtues and democracy. These papers feature detailed and colorful designs inspired by antiquity. Although it may be older, The bottom wallpaper from Linden Place displays neoclassical themes by employing acanthus leaves in its designs, a plant shape that was common in classical art. Gothic revival patterns paid homage to the sharp and elegant Gothic architectural style that flourished during the High and Late Middle Ages, from around 1000 to 1500 CE. Gothic patterns primarily featured pointed arches, hook-shaped ornaments known as crockets, trefoils, and rose windows, which derived from medieval architecture. Fresco papers were used primarily in the mid-19th century and were meant to give the illusion of compartmentalized walls with moldings and cornices. In essence, these designs created panels that often framed solid colors or relatively monochromatic patterns. They also bear resemblance to earlier architectural imitation pieces, but covered entire walls rather than acting as a frame. The Rococo style first appeared in France in the 1730s and was characterized by its theatrical and extravagant displays using scrolls, curls, white and pastel colors, and molding to create drama in motion. Over 100 years later, by the 1840s and 1850s, the Rococo revival popularized the style once again, replacing straight lines with curves and employing dense scrollwork. In 1841, the architect Augustus Pugin described the style as glaring, showy, and claimed that it disgraces every branch of our art and manufactures. Kitchens and bathrooms were not always decorated with wallpaper, as those rooms were considered utilitarian in nature. When wallpaper was employed in the kitchen in the latter half of the 19th century, it was not just textile, as those would easily become dirty. Refinements in wallpaper production made it possible for machines to print oil-based pigments on smoother surfaces. The resulting sanitary papers were washable and were primarily used in kitchens and bathrooms. Linden Place is an example of such paper, which is pictured on the slide. It is worth noting that the design bears resemblance to tiles that are often used in kitchens today. When it came to interior design and the use of paper hangings, authors varied widely in their opinions of where certain patterns should be hung. However, certain rules were universal. Halls were primarily decorated with large designs such as architectural imitations, such as those pictured in the Georgian interior on the left. Dining rooms were often accented with hunting scenes, bold solid colors such as crimson, green, and blue, and in the latter part of the 19th century, flocked hangings. Parlors were usually decorated with light-colored wallpaper and scenic prints, such as that on display in the Federal Period Room at the Met. Simple wallpapers with small designs were often used in private rooms, and bedrooms in particular were left to an individual's unique tastes. Such tastes often included the ever-popular flower papers. Taking display methods into account, as well as what kinds of paper hangings were popular in the mid-19th century, an image of Linden Place as it would have appeared during the time period can be drawn. As a wealthy family, the DeWolfs would have undoubtedly sought to make their home as opulent as possible, which meant keeping up with the latest interior fashion. This watercolor painting, entitled General George DeWolf and Family, 1835 to 1840, displays how the parlors of the home may have been decorated. Patterns would have abounded, with bold colors, elegant drapes, and borders that did not necessarily have the same colors as the rest of the room. It would not have matched in our standards, but to the DeWolfs in early American society, it would have been the height of fashion. Although the appearance of the public rooms has thus far been conjecture, there is one example of what the wallpaper may have looked like at Linden Place during the 19th century. During renovations in Ethel Barrymore's bedroom, this wallpaper was uncovered. The design is a lovely floral that would have been very popular in the 19th century. The realistic paint style is French in nature, with the detail imitating real leaves and roses. It is currently unknown if this paper is original to the house, as it may have been brought over from the casino owned by Samuel Colt. No matter its origin, however, the floral print makes for a stunning example of 19th century taste and offers a glimpse of how wallpaper would have been displayed in the home. Thus concludes our presentation on 19th century paper hangings and how they may have been used at Linden Place. Thank you for listening, and on behalf of Linden Place, I hope you have enjoyed.